Okay, so today we're going to make sourdough starter. Hey guys, I'm Pierre, and today we're going to talk about sourdough starters. First, let's dive into the internet and see what it's all about. So let's check Google. Let's type in sourdough starter. Yeah. So sourdough starters are usually used to make leavened bread. And this is the sourdough bread. So we're not going to make one today, but check out the next video. We'll make one using the one we're going to make on this video. So sourdough utilizes natural fermentation, and it uses good bacteria and lactobacilli to make the bread rise, and it's also used to aid in digestion. Let's get back to making our own sourdough starter. First, you're going to need a container. You can use a glass jar or a plastic jar or container. So you also need something to label it with, like a masking tape or like this sticker, label sticker. But most of all, you need the weighing scale. Now you're going to weigh the jar or the container and write down the weight of the jar on the label. Next you need is flour. Today we're going to use all-purpose flour, but better to use bread flour or whole wheat flour. Let's talk about that later. Next important thing is water. Make sure it's not chlorinated. Filtered water is best. And you're also going to need spatula to clean the sides of the inside. Tama ba yun? Well, basta yung sa jar. And you're also going to need a mixing stick. In this case, chopstick will do. Next, you're going to need something to scoop your flour. So what I'm going to do now is basically transfer the flour to a better container. So let's talk about flour again. Organic and unbleached flour is best for this project kasi it has the most microorganisms that we can use and that we have to capture. But if you don't have access to those kinds of organic and unbleached, it's okay. Store-bought can be used. And now we're going to start making the starter by putting water, 50 grams of water, and then after that we're going to add 50 grams of flour. So my tip to you guys is unahin nyo yung water and then yung flour kasi mas madaling magbawi ng flour kapag sumobra siya ng timbang. So as you can see, I'm using a smaller scoop kasi in case na sumobra yung lagay ko, kaya kong babawi yon kasi hindi pa naman basa yung taas. So the most important step in this process is actually mixing the water and flour solution. Tama ba yun? Flour solution or mixture. But make sure, pinaka-importante dito is you have to make sure na walang dry patches of flour or dry flour dun sa loob ng container. When sometimes if you mix, magkakaroon siya ng dry patches sa ilalim or sa sides. So that's why you need the spatula kapag meron sa sides and sa bottom. So I use the chopstick to make sure dun sa nooks and crannies dun sa ilalim. Mas-scrape ko yung mga dry patches. Then I clean the sides with the spatula. And then I clean the spatula with the chopstick. After mixing very well, just cover the jar with a tight cover. Make sure it's not airtight. And then another important step is to actually name your starter. Why? It's because when you name something, most of the time you're going to take care of it. So when it comes to naming, it's really up to you. Some use may mga puns. For example, my cousin named it Erisa. But it's up to you. In this case, I'm going to name it Fuji. By the way, don't forget to write down the birthday of your starter so you'll know the age of your starter, and it's a good thing to know when you're giving it away. They'll know how old the starter is. Stay tuned sa end of the video. I'm also going to show 2 other starters that are older than this one. Now the question is, where will you put your starter? In this case, I'm going to put it inside a cabinet, but you can also place it on top of the table or anywhere that is room temperature and hindi siya magagalaw. Now it's time for day 2. Now we have 150 grams of starter. Yung iba nagde-discard sila. But in this case, since 150 grams lang, I'm going to feed it 1:1:1 ratio. So 1 part starter, 1 part water, and 1 part flour. Another tip for you guys is the first thing you add is again water. But this time, after adding water, the next step is mixing the water. Mixing the water and the starter evenly distributes yung culture na nasa loob. So also smell kung okay yung starter. If it's fresh and hindi siya nakakasuka, it's okay. Now, you add flour. So what I did is I added 150 grams of flour, 150 grams of water, because my starter is 150 grams as well. Now it's time to mix. And mixing it is a lot easier kung mas malaki yung container mo. In this case, I realized it's small, so I got myself a bigger container. So remember guys, when you're mixing, make sure it becomes very sticky, if I'm using the right term. As you can see, when I'm pouring, it's very sticky and it looks like a very thick pancake batter. And that's what you want, yung may gluten development. Kasi the more gluten development, more air will be trapped. As you can see, I'm just transferring the details of my starter dun sa kabilang lalagyan. But ang important is make sure there's enough room for your starter to grow or to expand. Now to monitor the rise or expansion of your starter, you can use a rubber band. Now it's time to cover your starter, and again make sure it's not airtight. And that's day 2. 5 more days after that, we can start making bread with it. 6 hours after mixing, it has risen 50%. When you see this, this means that your starter is active. If your starter is not yet active, it's okay, just continue the process. On to day 3. Now we're going to discard some of the starter. We're just going to leave around 50 grams of starter. Discarding some of the starter is for practicality, because the more starter, the more water and flour that you will need. Now what do I do with the discards of my starter? Well, I put them in a container, then I use them for sourdough pancakes, which I will make a video one day. Now from this point on, you'll basically repeat the steps on day 2. Remember what you're doing on day 3. Day 3 is basically the standard when it comes to feeding your starter. Remember the feeding ratio? It's equal parts starter, water, and flour. If you don't have a scale, you can measure it by cups or by ml. Remember, if you're doing it by eye or by feel, it should be thick pancake batter. Here we are on day 4, and guess what? My kids are with me. So Thor gets to join and Lightning McQueen. So here we are, we're going to discard some starter, pour some water, pour in some flour. Wait. Mix the water. Then pour in some flour. And then here we go again. Mix, 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 mix. For day 5 onwards, you are going to use the steps on day 3. Here we are on day 6, and as you can see, Fuji is hyperactive. Now, we'll just follow the steps on day 3. We discard some starter, add some water, mix the water in the starter, and add our flour. And of course, don't forget to mix them all like there's no tomorrow. Now remember, one thing that can kill your starter is mold or amag. So if you see pink or blue or fuzzy, fluffy blue or pink streaks, your starter is dead. You can't use it. It's just throw away and start all over again. And here we are on day 7 with Fuji, our hyperactive starter. And as promised, I'm going to show you 2 of my other starters. Both of them are made with bread flour. This one is George, and this one is for me. So how do you maintain your starter? It's easy. You feed it 6 hours before you make your dough. After this process, you can put your starter on the counter or in the refrigerator. You will know your starter is hungry if you see some brownish liquid on top. That's what you call hooch. You can mix it or throw it away, but for me, I just mix it in. I store my starters on the counter where it is room temperature, and I feed them only once a week. If you want to back up your starter, you can place them in the refrigerator, and then you can feed them once a month. Only you can smell this starter. It smells fruity and sweet. To show you that that liquid on top is completely fine and safe, I will mix it in with the starter. But if you don't like, you can quickly skim off the top and take it out. So as you can see guys, it just takes 7 days to make your sourdough starter, or you can call it wild yeast. You can use this to make bread like pizza or cookies. It's up to you. After 7 days, it's a success. We made our own sourdough starter. Our next step is to make bread, and that's for the next video. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, hit the bell icon, and I'll see you next time.